Dustborn, a recently released title, is being slammed by many as the most aggressively progressive and radically left video game ever made. This game is set in a dystopian future and pushes a heavy-handed narrative focused on social justice, systemic oppression, and the so-called power of collective action. With a cast of characters that seem more concerned with checking every diversity box than telling a compelling story, Dustborn feels more like a political manifesto than an actual video game. Its relentless focus on pushing an agenda around gender identity, racial inequality, and environmental issues has drawn criticism for being preachy and overly ideological. Rather than offering an engaging gaming experience, Dustborn comes off as a one-sided lecture, more interested in ramming its radical views down players' throats than in entertaining them. But then again, why should you care about a terrible game you probably had no interest in ever playing? Well, here's the crazy part. What makes this situation even more infuriating is that the taxpayer partially funded Dustborn. It's one thing for a private company to produce a poorly selling game that pushes such a blatantly political agenda, but it's another when public funds are used to bankroll it. The fact that taxpayer money was diverted to support a project that many view as an indoctrination tool rather than entertainment is a point of major contention. This has sparked outrage among those who believe that public funds should be used for more neutral or widely beneficial purposes, not to promote what they see as a narrow and radical ideological viewpoint. The controversy surrounding Dustborn is amplified by the notion that the very people who might disagree with its message were, in part, forced to finance it. So let's discuss this absolute dumpster fire further. I am Lady Decade, and this is why Dustborn is causing outrage. Gaming. It's bloody marvellous, isn't it? I think it's the greatest form of entertainment on earth, even if the cost of living crisis continuously makes the hobby a bit tougher. This might be the case, which is why I want to offer you a leg up and help you get games for 90% cheaper than in stores. Choose from thousands of modern AAA, retro and indie titles right now and grab a shopping list of bargains and support my independent voice simultaneously. Happy shopping, and I hope you enjoy this video. Speaking of video games, Dustborn, the one we are discussing today, is the poster child for attracting attention for all the wrong reasons. Through its Steam description, it lures players in with the promise to embark on a perilous road trip across a divided states of America. It assures gamers that they will be able to use the power of words to shape relationships with your crew, get out of trouble, and reach your final destination. But once you're in, the reality is a far cry from the hype. The game's lofty ambition to blend storytelling, social commentary, and innovative gameplay centered around dialogue quickly crumbles under the weight of its own pretentiousness. What was supposed to be a deep, character-driven experience is nothing more than a shallow, plodding mess that would, in most cases, even make the most open-minded gamers cringe at its sheer hubris. This one is that ridiculous. In an old interview found on PSU.com, a developer from Red Thread Games, the people behind the title, would proclaim that, as game developers, we wanted to tell a story that felt relevant and thematically timely, with a cast of characters that could more accurately represent our player base and the setting, and to hopefully have some positive impact on the world, in addition to being an entertaining game. Reflecting on this statement, I suppose a 2 out of 4 isn't terrible. It has indeed had a large impact on the world, but it would be tough to argue that this has been positive or entertaining as a finished product. But what it does successfully do is tell a story that is relevant and timely, especially bearing in mind the culture wars currently plaguing the Western world. We can even give them a huge pat on the back for potentially creating a game that accurately represents the player base, considering that according to Steam at the time of writing this video, an entire 9 people are playing this game around the world, with a measly all-time peak player count of 83. They did say they wanted to create a game that accurately catered to their player base, and it seems that they did this very well for the 9 people playing this on Steam and the 3 watching on Twitch. Those are insanely low numbers. To put into perspective how small an audience that is, Cassette Beasts, a small indie game that I have played, currently has 160 people playing it right now with a 2700 peak. Cassette Beasts was basically a game made in a bedroom which is over a year old, unlike Dustborn, which cost close to $2 million to produce, coming out last month. In the same interview, the developer states that the idea behind Dustborn's setting and characters was also influenced by a series of political events that deeply affected us all, beginning in the summer of 2016 and continuing until, well, today. With some sources, including that parkplace.com, attribute to the rise of Donald Trump's political campaign. No matter what you make of this statement, one thing we do know is that the game was purposely created to be combative and politically charged. This can be seen through every narrative, design and mechanical element implemented into the game. Dustborn pretends to be a cutting-edge action-adventure game set in a laughably altered version of America. The plot drags us through the dreary tale of Pax, a stereotypical con artist with the cliched ability to weaponize language, who finds herself tasked with carting a so-called mysterious package from one end of the continent to the other. Throughout this tediously long road trip, Pax scrapes together a motley crew that seems to check all the boxes for diversity but lacks any real substance or originality. Pax, our main character, is a 30-something black woman adorned with tattoos. She's designed to be shrewd and deceptive, manipulating others with her supposed superpower of using words to her advantage. Pax comes across as aggressive, quick to anger and paranoid, and although this accurately depicts your typical far-left activist, it doesn't make for a likeable protagonist. She is so angry all the time. Pax, more like Tampax. I mean, they walked into that one, didn't they? Like, did they not think of that before giving her that name? Jesus Christ. Despite her awful personality, you might be surprised that Pax has managed to make friends. Sai, her best friend, is described as a whirlwind of emotions and a true rebel spirit, which paints an image of instability rather than strength, and the claim that her vocal powers are formidable in manipulating density and weight would be impressive if she weren't clearly failing to use them on herself. Seems like the only thing she's managing to manipulate is the number on the scale, and not in the way she'd hope. But all women are 10s, right? Building on our cast of so-called outcasts, Noam is portrayed as Pax's on-again, off-again romantic partner. The introduction of Noam in the game feels awkward and contrived, particularly in the way their pronouns are prominently splashed across the screen almost instantly. This approach is embarrassing because it's yet another superficial way to place diversity at the forefront. Rather than allowing the character's identity to unfold naturally within the storyline, this method comes off as an overzealous box-ticking exercise that reduces a potentially complex character to a mere token. Focusing on pronouns this way reduces a key aspect of someone's identity to a flashy, gimmicky introduction, thereby ridiculing the very notion it aims to respect. Although, to be fair, looking at many Twitter bios, it's definitely what they want. Most hilarious of all though, out of our main human protagonists, we have Theo, a middle-aged, likely straight male. Now, at first glance, you might feel that the inclusion of such a character isn't very progressive at all, until you realise he's the only character in the game who has no vocal powers, and instead only uses his attentive listening skills to his advantage. Unlike the others, he doesn't have the opportunity to scream about what he wants in the game. Insanely, none of this game has been made as a parody, as much as the characters sound like they are from a South Park episode. Revisiting the thoroughly unpleasant Pax, her expertise lies in manipulating individuals, often pushing them to the brink of hysteria or other detrimental outcomes. Her toxic repertoire includes an ability known as normalize, which against their will warps people's perceptions, forcing others to think certain behaviours or feelings are normal. Additionally, she can sow discord, a divisive power that incites animosity and conflict among individuals, fostering disputes and even physical altercations. True to her stereotypical nature, she also possesses the power to cancel those who dissent or disagree with her, effectively ostracizing them from their social circles and allies.
You've been cancelled.
Building on her perceived powers, in the game's words, not mine, Pax is a bully. The game explicitly states that she has learned to bully people to coerce them into doing things they may not want to do, or at least make them feel terrible about themselves. When has behaving in this manner ever been considered a good thing, let alone be featured as the main attribute of a hero in a video game? This mischaracterization not only warps the concept of heroism, but also troublingly glorifies toxic and destructive behavior.
You are racist.
This game and its characters are incredibly difficult to like, so speaking of characters who are hard to like, let's see what the game journalists thought of this. Games Radar highlights the premise of the game that explores freeing a group from oppression from the dangers of a fascist, broken America, and despite the game's low quality, comments that, combined with its oddly sustained length, the sheer amount of topics and issues it wants to address, and its growing cast of colourful LGBTQ+ characters, it almost lives up to its promise as an epic political road trip saga about people with superpowers. However, despite seemingly showing support for the game's political messaging, even they add, I can't fault it for having ambition and a lot to say, but Dustborn loses power when it feels the need to look straight at the camera and make sure you understood it, hammering home points over and over again. They would also add that Dustborn is unabashedly queer. Dustborn's execution could be cleaner, and it could avoid undermining itself just to get its point across, but it's nice to play a game with something to say, even if it struggles to do it. Forbes would declare the game among the most unrepentantly liberal and left-leaning games out there, but add, even if you fall within its clear target audience, Dustborn's jarring start, odd mechanics and weird characters raise some strong early opinions, and it has a few missteps along the way. You might immediately want to take it out on the characters being unlikable in different ways, though that's kind of the point, as they have their imperfections, but it occasionally feels like Dustborn doesn't fully trust your intelligence. It rightly wears its heart on its sleeve, but still has a habit of mishandling strong allegories by spelling them out for you, to the point you can feel a little patronised, given its obvious audience is far from ideal. Despite admitting somewhat that this game often undermines players' intelligence, Forbes would recommend this unpopular game anyway, concluding, those who refuse to play it on principle don't know what they're missing. Dustborn might need patience and an open mind, but if you don't have either, what's the point in trying something new? Amusingly, despite this game being incredibly flawed and politically one-sided, IGN would almost comically comment that, to make Dustborn worthwhile, you need to embrace the whole package. And I'm assuming they are not talking about size. So yeah, rather interestingly, this game is so in your face regarding its standing politically that, to some degree, it's even taking game journalists aback who, for some reason, are nearly always incredibly left-leaning. They, on the whole, seem to be recommending that people play the game despite admitting that it is often, at points, very intelligence insulting. As one would likely expect, the mass general public hasn't been quite as forgiving towards the game as the likes of IGN, with many showing incredible anger and frustration that allegedly most of the funding that was gathered to produce this game was directly from taxpayers. That's right, you might have paid for this game without even buying it. Outspoken ex-user Grums would highlight information proclaiming that Dustborn used far more government money than has been previously reported. He alleges the Norwegian Film Institute funded the game for 14 million kroner, or nearly 1.4 million USD. This is in addition to the 150,000 euros from the Creative EU grants programme. He adds that, in his opinion, Dustborn is basically an Antifa training game. You bash the fash across the divided states of America by using vocal powers to call people racist. He then proceeds to show a screenshot which is verification of the 150,000 EU grant, as well as those given by the Norwegian Film Institute, a governmental organisation in Norway responsible for supporting and promoting Norwegian film and media production, who, like the EU, are funded by European taxpayers. In a series of further tweets, Grums states that Red Thread Games looks to be funding multiple games by using government grants, even though statistics show that their games do not make money. What a farce. He adds that the company seemed to grift off of EU taxpayers, which are awarded in part on ESG criteria. He also shows us another screenshot demonstrating that the Norwegian Film Institute focuses on productions where the percentage of women in key roles is a factor. He believes the funding may have been pursued through their publisher, Quantic Dream, via their Spotlight Reports program. Grums believes all of this funding is the reason that Red Thread Games is able to continue to produce titles, even though it doesn't seem the games can make enough money to pay for their production. He concludes that it's concerning that Dustborn has been crafted as a political agitprop tool backed by taxpayers who do not want this kind of disruption to their cultures or society, but it is clear the Red Thread Games does not care or depend on gamers' sales for their continued existence or ability to produce political propaganda games. With the game's politically charged nature, incredibly low player numbers, and the fact that it seems that it may have been funded by the taxpayer rather than making a profit through being sold to a huge audience, it quickly becomes clear why a backlash against the game's existence is mounting up, and it goes way beyond the title's aggressively loaded messaging itself. Stuttering Craig from the YouTube show Side Scrollers would also add to the conversation on X, adding that everyone might be laughing at Norway and the EU for funding Dustborn, but a quick search shows that the US also provided $275,000 of funding for a new counter-disinformation game, highlighting the notice of funding opportunity. This, of course, also annoyed people, with it becoming blatantly apparent that gamers don't want their governments wasting their taxes on pushing political agendas through gaming. It's an abhorrent way to allocate financial resources, actually. During the pushback against the existence of Dustborn, as is usual when these sorts of stories are unravelling, Kotaku.com would side against the backlash to this game, with one journalist, Kenneth Shepard, commenting, "It's always, stop making my games woke and make your own, until someone actually does it. Then these sorts of people find a new reason to harass developers who made a game they weren't the target audience for. The goalpost moves once again." Alright, Kenneth, so it has nothing to do with citizens having their taxes stolen to fund politically loaded art projects they want nothing to do with. According to Google user ratings, only 4% of people like this video game, with it being heavily criticised for both its political messaging and how it allegedly was funded. Red Thread Games, the developers behind Dustborn, would ultimately opt to respond directly to the criticism, including in their statement that "We expected Dustborn to spark conversation and debate, and look forward to engaging with our players in a positive and constructive fashion. Unfortunately, that conversation has been drowned out by a tidal wave of hate and abuse." Despite claims that they were looking forward to engaging with players and sparking conversation and debate, Red Thread Games would then cowardly lock replies on the tweet, removing gamers from the opportunity to engage, converse, and debate. How very progressive. Aside from the fact that people are upset with the fact that the taxpayer paid for this politically motivated game without an audience, while the narrative of Dustborn itself isn't very good, the narrative around the narrative of Dustborn is poetic. Dustborn tells a tale of Pax, an aggressive and manipulative woman who, as a central part of her toxic behaviour, bullies those she disagrees with, using coercion to make them feel terrible about themselves. As mentioned earlier in the video, I believe this sort of behaviour is not a good thing at all, and was baffled that the developers chose to feature such attributes in their heroine. This raises an important question. If, according to the developers, this is considered heroic behaviour, then by their logic, wouldn't those who bully others over disagreements about the existence of this game also be considered heroes? Again, I do not support bullying those I disagree with, but it seems a certain video game does. That's not to mention the use of the power of words, the exact power the game's detractors are using right now. Dustborn's portrayal of its protagonist and the underlying messages it conveys have sparked considerable debate, and for good reason. The game seems to inadvertently champion behaviours that are generally deemed negative, which raises legitimate concerns about the values being promoted, particularly when the agenda is being pushed using taxpayer money. Speaking of money, I for one prefer when I get to spend it myself rather than having to give it to the taxman. I can get you a huge discount on thousands of games, as you can see, even brand new ones like the title featured in this video. While I would not expect you to be interested in playing it, I can get you this game and thousands of others up to 90% cheaper than on Steam. Use my affiliate link to get great games for next to nothing and support an independent voice like mine simultaneously. Or if you really love my work, gain access to my cosplay library and more by joining me over on Patreon. I look forward to speaking with you directly over there soon. Come and see me or enjoy a cheap game now. Thanks, see you later.